Turned 32 on a Tuesday. That's not the part that matters, but it's where everything starts. March 11th. I remember because I'd been looking forward to it for weeks, not in a big way, just in the quiet way you look forward to something small in yours. My husband had promised me dinner at Nobu, the one downtown on the river. He'd made the reservation himself, which was unusual. He wasn't a reservation-making kind of person. That alone should have felt like a gift. I was a senior marketing analyst at a mid-size healthcare company in Cincinnati. My hours were flexible on paper and brutal in practice. I'd been putting in 60-hour weeks since January, and by March I was running on coffee and the promise of that dinner. My best friend. I'll call her what she was to me. My best friend, because that's how I thought of her. Until the day I didn't, had known me since freshman year of college. 12 years. She was one of those people you describe to others by saying she's been there through everything. And she had been. My dad's surgery. The miscarriage I never told my mother about. The job I almost quit twice. She was also, I know now, sleeping with my husband for at least 8 months before I found out. That morning started normally. I woke up, made coffee, found a card on the kitchen counter. My husband had already left for work. He was in commercial real estate, kept early hours when he had site visits. The card said, "Happy birthday, beautiful. Tonight's going to be perfect." I put it on the windowsill next to the potted rosemary I'd been keeping alive since the previous spring. I got ready, drove to work, answered emails. Normal. Completely, deceptively normal. At 2015 in the afternoon, my manager called an all-team meeting and told us the Hendricks account, the one I'd spent 4 months building out, had been restructured. My portion of the project was effectively on pause. There was nothing to do until the client-side decision came back, which could take weeks. She told me to take the rest of the day. I didn't think twice. I texted my husband, got let off early, coming home to get ready for tonight. "See you at 6. He didn't respond. I assumed he was with clients. I stopped at Kroger on the way home, picked up a bottle of wine. The Willamette Valley Pinot we'd had on our honeymoon and talked about ever since. I was in a good mood. I was 32 and I had a dinner reservation and a husband who'd made it himself, and the afternoon was mine. I pulled into the driveway at 3:40. Her car was there. I noticed it but didn't register it, not immediately. She had a key to our house. She'd had it for 3 years, since a period when she was going through her own divorce and would sometimes come over in the evenings when she didn't want to be alone in her apartment. I'd given it to her without thinking twice. She was family. That's what I would have said if anyone had asked. I went in through the side door, the one that opens into the mudroom. I set the wine down on the shelf. I heard something upstairs. Music, I thought at first. Low. Almost like a radio. I remember going up the stairs slowly, not because I was suspicious, but because I'd taken my heels off and the wood floors were cold and I was moving in my socks carefully. I remember the light in the hallway. It was the specific kind of pale afternoon light that comes through the window at the top of the stairs in March. Thin and flat and gray-white. I remember thinking, absurdly, that I needed to replace the bulb in the hallway fixture. The bedroom door was half open. I don't want to describe what I saw in specific terms. I think anyone reading this can fill in the picture. What I will say is that it was not ambiguous. There was no version of what I walked into that was a misunderstanding. They were in my bed, in the bed I'd picked out with my husband at a mattress store in Hyde Park on a Sunday afternoon 2 years ago. The bed I'd made that morning before I left for work, with the gray linen duvet cover I'd ordered from Koyuchi because I'd read that it was the kind of thing you invested in. I stood there. I don't know for how long. 10 seconds maybe? Maybe 30. Time does something strange in those moments. It doesn't stop exactly, but it loses its texture. I was aware of details with strange precision, the way one of the pillows had fallen to the floor, the fact that my husband's work shirt was draped over the chair in the corner, the smell of her perfume. Maison Margiela replica, beach walk, the one I'd actually recommended to her. She saw me first. She said my name. Just my name, like a question. He turned. And the expression on his face was the thing I will never stop seeing. Not guilt, not immediately. The first thing I saw was something like calculation. The split second where the brain tries to figure out if there's an exit, then he said it. The sentence that I have since learned is so universal, it might as well be a reflex. It's not what it looks like. I did not scream. I did not throw anything. I did not cry. I turned around. I walked back down the stairs. I picked up the wine bottle from the mudroom shelf. I walked out the side door, got in my car, backed out at the driveway, and drove. I drove for about 20 minutes without knowing where I was going. I ended up in the parking lot of a Panera Bread on Montgomery Road. I sat in my car and I stared at the steering wheel, and I waited to feel whatever I was supposed to feel. What I felt was quiet, not peace, not numbness, not exactly. Just this terrible, clarifying quiet, like when you've been hearing white noise so long that you stop noticing it, and then suddenly it's off, and the silence is almost loud. He called 4 times. She called twice times. She called twice. I didn't answer. I called my attorney instead. She's been my attorney for 2 years. I had retained her after we'd had a situation with a contractor who'd done significant water damage to our kitchen and refused to take responsibility. I had never needed her for anything like this, but I had her number saved. And the first clear thought I had in that parking lot was not what do I do, but who do I call? She picked up on the second ring. I told her what I'd come home to. My voice was steady in a way that surprised me. She was quiet for a moment and then she said, "Okay, don't go back to the house tonight. Don't respond to either of them. And before you do anything else, I need you to write down as specifically as you can what you saw and what time it was. Screenshots of the missed calls, timestamp on everything. Can you do that?" I said yes. "Good," she said. "Come in tomorrow morning at 8. I sat in that parking lot for 2 hours. I wrote down everything I could remember. I took screenshots. I forwarded myself the missed call log. I thought about 12 years. I thought about the way she had sat across from me at my kitchen table after my miscarriage, holding my hand saying, "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." And I wondered, in that flat gray way, when the lying had started, whether it had already been happening then. I booked a room at the Marriott downtown. It wasn't far, and I knew the lobby would be clean and quiet and anonymous. I needed anonymous. I did not take the wine in. He was at the hotel by 7 p.m. I don't know how he found me. Probably location sharing, which I had never thought to turn off because I had never had a reason to. He called from the lobby. I declined. He texted, "Please, let me explain. I know what you think you saw. Please just talk to me." What I think I saw. I put my phone face down on the nightstand and ordered room service. Chicken piccata and a glass of Chardonnay from the hotel menu. It was my birthday. I was going to eat dinner. The next morning, I was at my attorney's office at 7:55. She walked me through everything in the careful, methodical way that I would come to appreciate over the following months. Ohio is an equitable distribution state, which means marital assets are divided fairly but not necessarily 50-50. The court considers contributions, duration of the marriage, economic circumstances. We had been married 6 years. I worked. He worked. He worked. We had a joint checking account, 2 savings accounts, a brokerage account we'd opened together in 2022, and a house in Hyde Park with equity. She also told me something I hadn't known. Ohio does recognize fault in divorce proceedings, and adultery is considered marital misconduct. It doesn't guarantee a specific outcome, but it is a factor. Documented evidence matters. I had walked into that room at 3:40 on a Tuesday and I had taken nothing. But I remembered everything, and the 2 of them apparently had been careless. Because when I went through our joint credit card statements that evening, I found nearly 8 months of patterns I hadn't noticed when I wasn't looking for them. Hotel charges, restaurant bills, a weekend in Nashville in October when he'd told me it was a work conference I had helped him pack for. I printed everything. I organized it by date. I did not tell him I was filing. I did not give him a warning or an opportunity to move assets. I had a conversation with my attorney about what I was legally permitted to do, and I did exactly that, no more, no less. I separated my direct deposit to my personal account. I documented the equity. I made an inventory of the assets that were mine before the marriage. He thought he had time. He thought I was upset and that I'd come home eventually and we would have the conversation and he would explain and I would, what? Forgive him? Go back to making the bed with the Kuuchi duvet cover and pretending? He did not know me as well as he thought he did. She called me on day 3. I had been waiting for it in a way. I knew she would call eventually because that's who she was. Someone who needed to manage the narrative, who needed to be forgiven by the people she'd wronged, because being unforgiven meant living with what she'd done without any release valve. I answered. She cried immediately. She said she was sorry. She said it had started when she was going through her divorce, that she had been vulnerable, that it had been a mistake that had spiraled. She said she loved me. She said he was her best friend, and she couldn't lose me, and she hated herself. I let her talk. When she was done, I said, I know. She went quiet. I know when it started, I said. I know about Nashville. I know about the Kimpton and Blue Ash. I know about April last year when you told me you were in Chicago for work. She didn't say anything for a long time. I'm not going to scream at you, I said. I'm not going to tell your mother or post anything or try to ruin your life. But I need you to understand that I'm not going to forgive you right now, and I'm not going to pretend this is something we can just fix. You were in my home. You were in my bed. On my birthday. I've been at work since 7 in the morning. She started to cry again. I'm going to hang up now, I said. Please don't call me again. I hung up. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed for a while. The room was clean and anonymous the way I'd needed it to be. The curtains were thick and the city noise was muffled. I could hear the hum of the HVAC system. I thought about the fact that she had a husband. Well, an ex-husband, technically. Though their divorce had only been finalized the previous fall. I thought about the fact that he deserved to know that the woman he'd spent 7 years with had, while in the process of divorcing him, begun an affair with a married man. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because the truth has a way of being relevant in unexpected situations, in custody negotiations, in financial settlements, in all the paperwork that comes after a marriage ends. I contacted him through a mutual acquaintance we'd kept from the old days when the 4 of us used to go to dinners together. I didn't call, didn't text. I sent a brief, factual message through that third party. Just the dates. Just the documentation. I told him I wasn't asking for anything. I told him he could do with it whatever he thought was right. He called me 2 days later. His voice was the voice of someone who had suspected and hadn't wanted to be right. I'm sorry this happened to you, he said. I'm sorry it happened to both of us, I said. That was the only time we spoke. The divorce took 11 months. 11 months is not long in the scale of things. I know people for whom it took years. But 11 months, when you are living it, is its own country. You learn the language of it, the terms, the filings, the responses, the counter-responses. You learn to read documents with a specific kind of attention. You learn which hills to die on and which ones aren't worth the attorney's fees. We sold the house. That was the part that surprised me most emotionally. Not the marriage ending, which had ended for me in that hallway in March, but the house. The rosemary plant on the windowsill. The kitchen I'd learned to actually cook in. The yard where we'd had a party the summer before and strung lights from the oak tree and everything had looked the way things look when you're still inside your life and can't see it clearly. We split the equity. I walked away with enough for a down payment on something smaller and mine alone. My attorney was worth every dollar. There are things people say when you tell them what happened. They say, how did you not know? And I understand the question, but it still stings. Because knowing and noticing are not the same thing. I knew my husband. I knew his schedule and his coffee order and the exact way he deflected when he didn't want to have a hard conversation. I had simply trusted him. The way you trust someone when there's no specific reason not to. Not because you're naive, but because trust is not the same as surveillance. They also say, how did you stay so calm? And I find that one harder to answer, because I don't know if calm is the right word. I think what happened is that I made a decision very early in that Panera parking lot staring at the steering wheel that I was not going to let this make me into someone I didn't recognize. Not out of dignity exactly, though, that's part of it, more because I knew that if I came apart, I wouldn't be able to think clearly, and thinking clearly was the only thing I had in that moment. I didn't want to burn anything down. I wanted to be okay. Those are different things. I moved into my own place in February, 11 months after my birthday. A two-bedroom condo in Oakley, third floor, with a small balcony that faces east. I get the morning light. I've started growing herbs again. Basil, thyme, flat-leaf parsley in terracotta pots I bought at the farmer's market on Madison. I have not heard from my best friend since that phone call. I have heard, through the kind of information that reaches you even when you're not looking for it, that she is no longer with my husband. Whether that ended before or after the divorce papers were signed, I don't know. I don't particularly need to. What I know is that she has to live with what she did, not as punishment. I'm not interested in her suffering as some kind of payment on a debt, but as fact. The way I have to live with the knowledge that someone I trusted for 12 years was capable of that, and that I didn't see it. We're both living with something. My ex-husband called me once, about 4 months after the divorce was final. I don't know what he expected. The call lasted less than 2 minutes. He said he was sorry. I said I appreciated that. He said he hoped I was doing well. I said I was. Both of those things were true. The rosemary plant is still alive. I brought it with me when I left. It's on the kitchen windowsill of my condo now, in the same terracotta pot, next to a small aloe vera I bought at the Home Depot in Newtown on a Sunday in March, almost exactly a year after everything happened. I don't know why I kept it. Maybe because I'd been keeping it alive long before any of this started, and it seemed important to let it keep going. My balcony faces east. The morning light is good. I am 33 years old. I am a senior marketing analyst. I pay my own mortgage and make my own coffee. And I know, with a clarity I did not have before, exactly who shows up when things fall apart. It turns out that's the only thing you actually need to know. I've thought a lot about what it means to trust someone. Not the kind of trust you declare out loud. Not the wedding vow version. Not the thing you say when you're trying to convince yourself. The quiet kind. The kind that just lives in you because you've never had a reason to question it. That's what I had, and I think the hardest part of what happened wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing that my trust had been real, and theirs hadn't been. That's not a failure on my part. It took me a long time to understand that. There's a version of this story where I fall apart, where I go back to the house and scream and throw things and say everything I probably had a right to say. Where I spend the next 2 years, bitter and stuck, replaying every dinner, every vacation, every ordinary Tuesday, looking for the moment I should have known. I understand that version. I don't think less of the women who live it. But I knew, sitting in that parking lot on Montgomery Road on my 32nd birthday, that if I let myself burn down, I would be the one who had to rebuild from ash. And I had already been through enough. What I chose instead was clarity, not peace. I want to be honest about that. There was nothing peaceful about the 11 months that followed. There were nights in that hotel room and later in my apartment when the grief hit sideways, the specific grief of losing someone you loved who turned out to be someone else entirely, the marriage and the friendship at the same time. That kind of loss doesn't have a clean shape. But I had made a decision early. I was going to think clearly. I was going to document, organize, and act. I was going to let my attorney earn her fee, and I was going to come out the other side with something that was mine. Here's what I believe now. Not from a book or podcast or anything someone told me, but from having lived it. The choices people make are their own. My husband made a choice, she made a choice. Not once, many times over many months. On many ordinary days when I was at work or asleep or making plans I didn't know were already hollow. Every single one of those was a decision, and decisions have weight. They accumulate. They shape the life you end up living. I didn't have to punish them. I just had to make my own decisions with the same intentionality they'd used in making theirs. I separated my finances. I documented the truth. I told the person who deserved to know. I moved. I grew herbs on a balcony. I got the morning light. Integrity isn't something you perform for an audience. It's what you do when you're sitting alone in a hotel room on your birthday with room service getting cold, and your whole life has just rearranged itself without your permission. It's whether you can still look at yourself the next morning and recognize the person in the mirror as someone you respect. I could. That's the thing I'm most proud of. Not that I survived it. Survival is just endurance, and endurance is something most people can manage if they have no choice. What I'm proud of is that I came through it without becoming someone I didn't want to be. That I was honest. That I was fair, even when I didn't have to be. That I built something real afterward, quietly, without anyone watching. The rosemary is still alive. That matters to me more than it probably should.